Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the conversation, do you mind telling people a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
I'm Danielle Dziurun, and I'm the L&D manager at DT Consulting. At DT, our consultants help life sciences companies lead large-scale digital transformation efforts for customer experience success. And I've been in L&D for 8 years now. I started off in digital learning, following a career change from being a lawyer. So that was quite a big change, but absolutely love being in the L&D space. So that's a bit about me.
Yeah. I've never heard that transition before. I've heard teaching, I've heard that customer success maybe to L&D, but never from a lawyer. That's really interesting.
Actually, there's a lot of transferable skills there. So
Okay. I guess is it kind of like negotiation, being clear? Is it those kind of things?
yeah, but translating, really
Mm,
complex subjects into clear and understandable language. I love the sort of strategic side of things, and um, you know, a lot of the work that I've done is setting up L&D functions and doing the strategic side of it. So
mm.
yeah, there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now you say it, I can see it. So that makes sense. To say a little bit of context, the main reason I wanted to speak to you today is because on the form to sign up to the What the Fluff L&D Bootcamp, which people can still sign up for using the link in the description, there's a form for people to tell us what they most want to get out of the course. And one of the most selected answers is, I'm new to a business. I want to build an effective strategy that has impact. And straight away, I was like, right, I need to speak to Danielle because she's someone I know who has really practical advice about understanding how you're perceived in the business, making sure that you spot quick wins or places to add value, and how you align to your business goals. So hopefully, we're going to give people those practical tips to build that foundation today.
Yes.
Starting with, how do we understand perception? So we're new to a business, we want to audit how we're perceived and what the pain points are. I know you've got some great advice on how you did this when you first joined DT Consulting. So yeah, what would your step-by-step process be to do that effectively?
For sure. Well, I just take you through, I guess, my experience and what I did because when I joined DT Consulting, there was no L&D function, and it was my first time stepping up into, uh, that kind of level of strategic role where I was creating and laying the foundations for an L&D function. And my first step was to develop a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I'd really recommend anyone to read The First 90 Days by Michael Watson. It's an amazing book on how to set yourself up for success when you step into any kind of senior role for the first time. And that helped me to focus my efforts and hit the ground running in the role. And I actually presented it during my interview process. So it was basically validated by our leadership and talent director through that process. And the plan basically served as my guiding North Star in those first crucial months on the job, which was especially important because there was nothing there, to start off with. So, I mean, my main aim in the first sort of 30 to 60 days was just to learn as much as I could, to gain a deep knowledge of the business, its context, its people, and its culture. And I set myself some key goals. So I wanted to understand DT and the talents team's vision, missions, strategy, and priorities. And I wanted to learn about the organizational culture and operating model, really gain that deep insight into the business, and also start to identify and meet with key stakeholders and colleagues at all levels. So during that time, I just spoke to as many people as I could across the business, from our junior consultants, our internal team members, through to, our C-suite, to gain insights that would help me, develop that understanding. And as I mentioned in the blog post that I did for you previously, I used a standard set of questions, which was inspired by a post about setting yourself up in your first 100 days in a new role on Helen Bailey's amazing blog, The Ramblings of an L&D professional. And that's another point that I'd like to make, like just, tap into your network, build a strong network of L&D, professionals to support you, because it's an amazingly supportive community. And even through like L&D Disrupt, I've met lots of people and made loads of connections that have just been so helpful to me for advice. And so using those sort of standard set of questions, which were really about, figuring out, you know, how people perceived their place in the organization, what the challenges were that they were facing, what current L&D activity was going on, to identify those kind of pockets of knowledge share that were already going on in the business that I could tap into, and what they kind of thought about L&D, what they were expecting. And this helped me to really build up a picture of what people wanted and what they expected from L&D, and maybe redirect a little bit if the expectations were unrealistic, what their aspirations were and what their pain points were, and to just generally get a really good sense of our people, the culture, the priorities for learning and development. And as a very visual person, I just took all that information that I'd gathered from those interviews and I mapped it out into, I used Miro, but you could do it in any way. You could use Excel, you could use Word, whatever works for you. And it just helped me to start identifying the patterns and to spot the common needs and concerns and priorities, and really start to identify some quick wins as well for L&D, because you want to start building up that identity, start serving people's needs, while in the background you're laying some of that more longer term strategic foundation.
Yeah, I love that list of questions. I'll link the blog post in the description as well, because
Sure.
one thing I love about it, it will help you get consistent, objective feedback rather than asking different questions to different people, becoming subjective. And then, like you say, mapping it out is a really good step, because you will visualize where the commonalities are across the pain
Yes.
points, or what people actually really love about what you already do. So once you'd mapped it out, how did you kind of funnel that into your immediate next steps?
Well, that was so all of that filtered into the next part of my 30, 60, 90-day plan, the 60 to 90 days, which was all about strategizing and starting to articulate that fully aligned vision for the future of L&D at DT. And my goals in that stage were basically to perform a learning needs analysis, to implement some of those quick wins, and start to define the strategic priorities and key initiatives that I'd be working on, and following on from there, and get senior leadership alignment on all of that. And so the mapping exercise that I did and the insights I gained through that whole exercise were just invaluable, because they were basically my compass. They pointed me in the right direction, and I used them to validate and add depth to the results of a preliminary learning needs analysis survey that I ran. And this exercise also started to help me build up a stakeholder map for L&D. So it was an opportunity to start forming those key relationships and connections to internal experts, as well as colleagues and leaders that just had like a passion for learning, who I then was able to approach and get support and from, to when I was spearheading my first L&D initiatives, including those kind of early quick wins. So for us, that was building a knowledge hub and launching a cross-functional lunch and learn program to bring all these little pockets of really awesome knowledge sharing that were going on into a centralized place. And yeah, it was really useful for that.
The stakeholder mapping is a really interesting idea. I've not heard people mention that before, but I guess you're looking for who values what, who has what skill set, varying levels of interest, and visualizing
Yes.
that, I guess, is really helpful on understanding who you need to influence and in what ways.
Exactly. And again, I did a bit of a map. So, and there are great tools online. If you look up stakeholder map on Google, you'll come up with loads of different examples. But you're really starting to understand your stakeholders, your supporters, also people you, as you say, you need to influence a little bit, people who might be a bit resistant, and it's really important, from a change management perspective, to get those people along the journey early, because a lot of them will turn into your greatest supporters later on down the line.
I'm learning something I'm going to take away and apply to myself actually, because I realized that not everyone is invested in marketing in the same way or views it the same way. And in some of my previous jobs, if I'd mapped out the stakeholders on that basis of like who interacts with who and what are they interested in and what's their perception and how hard are they going to be to win over, I would have built some better relationships, I think, that would have helped me in the long term. So I'm going to steal this idea as well.
Nice, I love that.
The next thing you mentioned really early on, actually, you wanted to understand the culture, the values at the company, and I think that's such an important step because if we want our L&D brand to win, it has to be connected to those things to give people something to buy into. And I know you've done that by connecting development with a core value, which is to cultivate curiosity. So tell us a bit more about bringing those things together.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just like for a bit of context for anyone that's not familiar with the world of consulting, and I suppose this applies to professional services generally, is that it's a knowledge-driven profession. I mean, consultants think for a living, and they deliver value with their expertise, critical thinking, creativity and interpersonal skills. So staying on the forefront, within a world and a business context that's constantly changing and evolving means that they need to be constantly learning and adapting. And what drives this more than anything? Well, it's this curiosity. And one of my first significant pieces of work at DT was to spearhead the development of a capability framework, to outline, what high performance looks like and to support our people's development and career progression. And it was extremely important for our leadership team that our core values, which for DT are excellence, integrity, empathy, belonging, and curiosity, that they were woven into the fabric of what it means to do well within our organization. And therefore, building and sharing knowledge and developing oneself and others are essential performance expectations within our framework, and they're key milestones for advancement at every level of a person's career with us. So it really starts with building those values into the very foundations of how you operate. And so prioritizing continuous learning in that way and aligning it with our core values has really been like a cornerstone of fostering that kind of culture of of curious inquiry. Um, and we've with the recent launch of DTIQ, which is our HowNow powered learning and knowledge sharing platform, that's really been the next step in the evolution of our learning culture and the brand and my brand at DT. By enabling people to kind of share knowledge instantaneously, and leverage social learning, it's really supporting our community to like rapidly address learning needs and gaps and promote that culture of like innovation and progress.
I suppose that's so important when you've got a team of consultants who probably rely on learning from what other people have already tried or other people's experience. I think maybe being able to reduce the friction in communicating, the friction of sharing knowledge with each other must actually make a really big benefit to how people can perform, I guess.
Yes, definitely. Because as I said, things are constantly changing. Being able to share, one of the challenges is to avoid reinventing the wheel. We're solving problems all the time. So being able to share how we've solved a particular problem cross-functionally means that, you're not wasting time like trying to figure out a problem that's already got a great solution to it.
Oh, 100%. People know me and my approach to content. No, I'm not interested in reinventing the wheel because most things are about doing just proven things to a high level, execution over ideation a lot of the time. So
Yes.
I can see that. I want to come back to this idea you mentioned about the capability framework and having it woven into what it looks like to perform well here. I think that's maybe an easy thing to overlook, but connecting the values to L&D actually sets clarity around what performance looks like in the company or what the high standards are when people perform. So I really think that's a great step to to bleed the two together and make sure that there is a real sync up between here's what our values, here's what performance looks like, here's what clarity is across everyone. So there is no ambiguity anymore.
That's right. It just sets the direction, and then it basically is infused in everything that you do within L&D.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you mentioned North Star earlier, and actually, that's if everyone's pulling in the same direction, then you've set yourself up for a good success anyway.
Exactly.
Something I learned from you last time we spoke is the power of aligning your business to commercial goals. So, yes,
Mhm.
it's really important how people perceive us. Yes, it's great we're helping individuals on their day to day, but we also need to be looped into what the commercial goals are and how we can best support them. So, any advice on building a commercial understanding and why that's quite important?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important as an L&D professional, especially if you want to be that strategic business partner to develop your business acumen. And in my opinion, to do this effectively, you just need to develop a really deep understanding of the business that you're operating in, how it makes its money and its internal and external environments. Find out which areas are profitable and which offer those growth opportunities. And that knowledge will help you connect your L&D efforts to the overall business goals and revenue generation more effectively. When speaking with leadership, you can gain credibility by establishing that you understand their business priorities and can help support them in achieving their business goals. Start by engaging in conversations about business drivers and identifying key dependencies on people and their capabilities to execute that business strategy. Um, you know, and this is a big thing, like to engage business leaders effectively, you need to talk about competence gaps and needs and not training. When a business leader says they need training to solve a pain point, that's like the lights flashing. It's your job at that point to gain the insights into the actual root causes of the business problem and find the L&D solution, if that's what it is. Sometimes it isn't an L&D solution, it's something completely different. And in many cases the default is, oh, we have a gap here, we need a training solution. But many times it's not. It's some other thing that needs to be tweaked. So finding that solution that's actually going to move the dial, and then importantly, demonstrating how you're going to do that with data. Being able to think and speak the language of a business person, that's how you can meet people on their level. It's as important as being, in my opinion, an expert in your field.
No, I love that. A lot of the time, what I try and do is work backwards from the end goal, and I think this speaks to that because if we know that the end goal is X, Y, Z commercially, then you can quite easily make the case for, well, these are the skills we would need to do that, and if we don't have them, then we
Yes.
work back to the solution. But if you prescribe training and then try and retrofit everything, then I don't think the flow isn't there that needs to be there to win.
And it's tempting, it can be tempting to just, oh, you need training. Okay, I'll do that for you. But I just think that your end goal is to ultimately have that impact. And if you keep that in mind, then, you can start having those kind of conversations.
Yeah. And what's nice about this, if we marry it together with the first piece of advice to go and speak to people, I think we can avoid the trap that I often hear people say of, I want to stop being seen as an order taker. Because I
Hmm.
think a lot of the time, if you just go off what people tell you is important, you can actually follow things that won't have a huge impact. But if you know that
Yes.
this area of the business is growing substantially, or this is the most profitable area of the business, you can kind of match that up with, well, people are telling me this is important, but commercially it potentially isn't. So I can find the balance between still supporting that person with their problem, but making sure I spend an appropriate amount of time on the thing that's going to keep the business financially viable, continuing to make profit and growing in the right way.
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, ensuring that your L&D strategy is aligned to the business strategy, that helps keep
Yeah.
you on track. Having those regular conversations with business leadership to understand the direction they're going in, and then making sure that what you're working on is aimed at helping them achieve, and helping the business achieve those goals.
Yeah. I think this is something I learned from the last time I spoke with you as well, is about understanding when you're having check-ins if
Mhm.
you're only having a check-in every 3 to 6 months and things in your business change really quickly, think of what you might
Yes.
miss between each check-in. So I suppose that's part of it as well. Like make sure you have the touch points to know when changes happen commercially, when changes happen on problems to be solved front as well.
Yeah, that's right. Have a get a seat at the table.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, the advice you gave me last time was like, just make sure it's simple, consistent questions for 15-ish minutes. Like,
Yep.
was it, does the thing I do still help you solve the problem? Are the problems still the same? Are there new problems coming up? Like something as low touch as that regularly will make sure you are staying on the right course.
That's so true.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about was data. So to do a lot of what we spoke about so far, we need to use data to prove our impact, to understand the real pain points. And data can often seem daunting because I think people believe they need to build all of their own data, but actually, a lot of the
Mm.
time, the data we need already exists, doesn't it? So, how can we kind of get our hands on that existing data?
Yeah, so as I said before, to you in our previous conversation, I think a lot of the information is like out there in the wild already, and it's up to you to go on a bit of a treasure hunt across your organization to discover what already exists. I mean, as strategic business partners in L&D, we want to really, as we've already talked through, we want to identify those business KPIs we want to influence, and then the sources of data that we can look at to help us demonstrate our impact. And I've personally been inspired by Will Thalheimer's learning transfer evaluation model. It's kind of an alternative to Kirkpatrick, and it's incredibly versatile and has its uses in instructional design and learning evaluation. But it's also helped me to think outside the box in terms of the kind of learning data that could be useful for demonstrating impact. And just to give a bit of an explanation for people that aren't aware of the model is that it basically ranks the relative value of the measures of effective learning, and it starts at attendance and engagement at the lowest level, goes up through learner perception and knowledge, which gives some evidence of effective learning having taken place, up through demonstrating decision and task competence on the job, and through to the top, which is the wider impacts of transfer of learning being the best evidence for learning effectiveness. And this really broadened my thinking to look beyond the usual L&D data, that attendance and completion rates, smile sheet results, knowledge test results, to where I could find those sources of data that would provide that deeper analysis and demonstrate those impacts on the job, in terms of performance and to the wider business. So just some examples of data, around performance and productivity, retention, attrition, and engagement, customer satisfaction scores and feedback, operational and financial performance data, marketing and business development. And so there's a lot out there within your other teams, and building cross-functional relationships is so key to that, connecting with people across the business and keeping those conversations live.
It sounds like an interesting framework. If you can send me the link after this,
I
I'll make
will
sure
for
that's in the
sure.
description as well. I like it because not all metrics are created equally. I think sometimes we end up falling into that trap in any industry. I see it all the time, but treating every metric as if it has the same level of importance. What I try and do is measure based on intent. So if something was designed to do a thing, does it do that thing, as opposed to like trying to match it onto all these other different metrics that don't really feel connected. So
Yes, I love
I really
that.
like that. Yeah. Perfect. I wanted to also come back to something I've heard you talk about and we touched on earlier, but removing friction for learners, because if we spot those quick wins and we want to add value quickly, we want to make sure the process isn't heavy friction for people to find the information they need. So just just some any thoughts you can share with people on how you make it less friction filled when people are trying to learn.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about making sure that learners can access learning quickly and find the relevant information. So it's about ensuring that trainers that you remove friction from training by making sure that learners can access it quickly and find the relevant information. It's DTIQ has been amazing for this. So by providing bite-sized learning and building it into the flow of work, and creating performance support tools that are quick and easily digestible. We've sort of removed a lot of the friction around accessing learning, but also, making it easy to build, share, and access knowledge in an integrated one-stop shop. I've worked in a lot of places, I'm sure we have, where we've got multiple platforms that you need to find this piece of information in or that piece of information in. So that's one of the things that we love about HowNow's platform at DT, is that it has this integrated search which pulls everything together and just has that sort of seamless user experience. And love the browser extension too, where you can sort of access what's in your universe within a Google search as well. And I think also, traditionally, or in previous roles, L&D has sometimes been a bit of a blocker because you are very busy. And so people have all these things that they want to do, and they have a need that needs to be serviced quickly. But you sort of say, well, I've got these 10 things I'm working on at the moment, and I can help you in 6 months' time. So having that capability, or areas where people can actually, produce that user-generated content and serve their own needs with your guidance or with some support from L&D templates, whatever it might be, that also reduces friction in the experience, and basically just keeping on the pulse of what your learners needs are, and making sure that you're super responsive, being available, open to regular feedback. It's not a once and done kind of conversation. It needs to be ongoing, so that you're really delivering what's needed.
No, I completely agree. Um, Being biased, obviously, but I really also like the unified search that we have at How Now, because it means that everything is in one place. And when we were putting together the trends report at the end of last year, people were waiting potentially up to days to get answers to questions or to find the information they needed to do their job well. So
Yes.
the more you do that, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
the other
great.
thing as well is yeah, I think this idea of allowing people to create content is another one. Like if you remove yourself as the blocker, and most people
Mhm.
say that they can feel like a blocker, or they feel like they've got this big backlog of content that needs to be created, you cannot be as responsive as you need to be to what people are working on. So I suppose ruthless prioritization would be another
Yes.
part of it. Like, what do I actually need to do that's going to have the most value, and get off the hamster wheel of just churning out more content? Or, look at your backlog of things people have asked you for, and what actually needs to be done, what's going to have value based on all the great steps we've taken so far.
That's it. And I think another point that's just come to mind is, leveraging the people that you identified early on as your supporters, and, using them as learning champions, train them up, get them to set up their own communities of practice, and start to generate their own kind of learning activities, because you have incredible expertise within your organization. And, people are usually, I've found, really excited to share that with their colleagues.
No, funny enough, you just reminded me of when I spoke to one of our customers like a year or two ago. But during the setup of their learning space, the head of L&D was trying to create everything and found it really difficult to do it all by herself. And she brought in those learning champions. And I remember her saying to me, I had more in 10 days with everyone involved than I did over 10 weeks by myself.
Yes.
So, get people who are passionate about it involved, set good guidelines so you're all consistent in what you create, but bring other people on board at the right stage, and they feel invested too, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Daniel, thank you so much for this conversation. I know people are going to find a lot of great practical advice in there, and I'll try and drop all of the links to stuff we discussed in the description so they can go check it out.
Thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Gary.